Hi, John.
Hey, Harold.
It's been a while here since we
Feels
last
like it
gotten together. Yeah, I think
That's right. We did have a virtual session last time.
we did that virtual
was cool.
session. Yeah, it was.
That was good.
It was an experience. We hadn't had that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to hit on this topic today because I believe this month was designated as
Asian American.
Okay.
Wait, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month.
Yes. And that right now has been rescinded.
It has, actually, yes.
And that's kind of interesting in the fact that, we're watching sort of this administration sort of dismantle all of the things that are sort of been set up and relegated and what we have come to expect and celebrate,
yes.
The diversity that we have amongst them. But I wanted to kind of get a deeper dive into that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, we can talk through like what happened on that and later, but it's interesting because it's being not taken away. There was an executive order signed that admonished it and abolished what.
Okay, so it's abolished.
Yeah, it's gone. So it was. I can't remember what department it was sitting under, but It's all gone. You don't hear about it much anyway, right? You don't hear about it much as you do typically during the regular month of May, where they'll have commercials and they'll remind you, hey, this month is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander month. Let's celebrate it for all the accomplishments that those people's helped establish here in the U.S. So I think that's a little.
So why was the month of May chosen as a celebratory for this?
There was two dates from what we're reading here. There's two significant events that happened in May and that is why May was picked for the month to celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders. The first was Japanese immigrants arriving into the U.S., May 7th, 1843. And then the second event was May 19th, 1869, the final spike for the transcontinental railroad track, in which Chinese laborers played a crucial role. Those are the two events. Yeah.
So the last spike, that is really, when I think about that, the last spike in the transcontinental railroad was driven in the ground on May 19th,
69.
That was
Think about that.
5 years after slavery was abolished in this nation.
Yeah.
Wow.
You don't think about that.
No, you don't.
The milestones that we know of for, the diversity that we have in this country.
Right.
Asian American, I would say, is probably something that you don't really discuss.
And that's always sort of, it sort of befuddled me all this time. I knew that Chinese people were instrumental in helping to complete this railroad system that we have in this country. Yeah. But we don't talk about that.
Yeah, because you think about the history books and what you learn in history, U.S. history especially. You hear about the Transcontinental Railroad.
Yes.
You know that, it connected the East Coast to West Coast, so now you could, move things, move goods and freight and goods and commodities cross country. But you don't realize that
the people that helped to build this.
Yeah, exactly.
Under the rest conditions.
Exactly.
I've seen bits and pieces, John, that you sort of said, what was life like for these individuals who were put in these conditions out in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah.
And so in doing so, again, their contributions, the ones that perished probably along the way, and I'm sure there must have been.
There must have been, yes.
That we don't talk about it. We don't celebrate it. And so the month of May was designated as one of those moments where America itself overall celebrated the fact that here's a contribution that Chinese Americans made to this country.
Not just Chinese, all Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, all the Pacific Islanders, like we're all, as a whole.
For the month of May.
For the month of May.
So in the celebration, we celebrate, they say Black History Month in the month of February. And I always question that. I always say, why the month of February?
Yeah.
Why not the year round?
Why
throughout? And everybody.
That too.
Yes.
Yeah, we did talk
Why
about
not
that,
everybody? And so I'd say the same thing here is that I don't want to just celebrate the fact that this month was only designated for those ones that contributed to the national landscape.
Right.
Which has, and I say has a global effect, because here, this country was always highlighted as the place everyone around the globe, for the most part, wanted to be.
Yeah. But you think about that Asian Americans today all immigrated to the U.S.
Yes.
They wanted to come. They came willingly to the U.S. to find a better life, to get out of an oppressive, regime, whatever it was.
Right.
They found that America was the answer. And then just to, again, not be included in that type of history,
right.
I think is it's a messed up on history in itself and what we teach, how we teach. Did you ever as growing up ever think of that, or did your parents ever talk about? No,
or
never. No. So it's whatever we heard in the history books. Number one, I think the other thing too is, my mom. She immigrated here from Hong Kong when she was 10 years old or so.
Okay.
So I am a first generation on her side.
Okay.
So her, the people that she, her relatives and, they
all in China.
Came, all in China. And then they came here, with her family and her mom and her dad and then her brothers and sisters.
Okay.
And then now myself, my cousins, we're all first generation born here. And
what about on your dad's
side? It wasn't history, right? There's not that history there in the U.S. But my dad's side, yes, for sure. Third generation born here in the U.S. So my grandfather, my dad's dad, was born here in the U.S., New Mexico. I don't know a lot of the history, a lot of the story. I hear rumors of like, hey, he worked on a celery farm, I want to say, and maybe it was some type of indentured servant kind of thing.
Okay.
Where he had to be working there. I'm not too sure.
It's always interesting when you start to dig back a little bit if you can, and it's kind of hard to do sometimes, how he got here.
Right. And I don't know.
That's what I mean. I'm saying
that backstory. And then I think my grandma, I think she came over as I think she immigrated in.
Okay.
And she was a little older, maybe younger. And then she, learned.
So I wonder, did they hear about the potential freedoms and opportunities in this country back at that time? The reason why they migrated to this?
I don't know. And it'd be great to hear those things. Both of my grandparents, unfortunately, have passed, but it would be great to hear from my father and my aunts and uncles to say, or even if I don't think we have any great uncles or aunts still that are left alive, but it would be great to heir why, what motivated them to get over here and why did they do it? It is interesting to hear because again, third generation here, my dad born and raised in El Paso, Texas.
See right there.
I mean my grandfather owned a convenience store.
Okay.
Right. I mean, he had the American dream. He built a business.
See, so I have to think that for some reason, or rather, they heard about this where they were and managed to get here.
Yeah.
To explore that opportunity. You see what I'm saying? So
we've got to dig. It'll be a great something to really.
So that I think that's kind of why.
But it helped. Yeah.
The celebration of it, but it doesn't just stop for the month of May. I would say that it should be.
I'm one person.
Yeah.
There are how many millions of other
stories.
Exactly of why somebody, and not just even for you think back of we're focusing on the Asian American experience in the Pacific Islander, Hawaiian, but think about the other ethnicities that we have coming over to this country. It's just amazing to think of.
Well, I think that and looking at us, we add to the diversity of this nation. I think that's one of the things that would potentially make America great is the embracing of all the diversity that we have in this country.
For sure.
And the contributions of those that have made in the past and the ones that are yet to make still in this country here, which is unlike most any other country on this planet.
Exactly.
And so that's why we kind of wanted to dive in a little bit into the history or aspect of the Asians, the population that they celebrate in this month here because I think that's very important. And I don't know a lot about it. And I'm sure there are folks out there that really have not heard anything about, the aspect of it, or even maybe even the month of May being celebrated.
You think about this month or what it was signed in as an executive order. Clinton was the one that signed it.
Okay.
So
I was going to ask you, when was it?
So it's 26 years or 25 years that it has been an actual something, right? That the U.S. recognizes federally the celebration.
And so recently here, this has been dissolved.
It's been dissolved, for when the current administration. I think that was a day one executive order for the administration.
Okay,
and they dissolved it. So,
well, I hope that people continue to celebrate that, despite the fact that the current administration has limited perspective on the diversity and the contributions that folks have made to this country.
Yep. It's funny, again, with Clinton having that executive order, there was a couple themes that the first commission reported. So the first one was kind of what we were talking about, missing in history.
Okay, yes.
So MIH is what they said. It's, we don't, the Asian American Pacific Islanders, they're invisible and they're relegated to a residual category of other. And so they weren't ever recognized. It was, hey, you're other. Now it's a little different today, right? When you look at certain things, they actually mark different types of ethnicities in the Asian community.
Right.
But, before it was just, you're either Chinese, other, right?
Yes.
Because Chinese was the majority that had come in.
Okay.
And that's what people associate when you ask, I don't know, and you ask about Asian Americans, most people think Chinese.
Right.
I think that's the first thing that people, but there's so many different cultures and ethnicities that that are not just Chinese.
Some of the ones I saw, which was kind of interesting, that highlighted here.
The total population now, right?
Right. It was talking about 6 groups basically that make up the majority of the Asian population, and that's it's Chinese is number 1, Indian, Filipino is number 3, Vietnamese number 4. Korean number 5, and then Japanese number 6.
Right.
And then you got a whole list of other groups that they just
of all others.
Yes.
Right.
Make up the inclusion.
It's a lot of different ethnicities that have come over, but the majority are Chinese, Indian, Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, right?
And so if you think about that, so the Chinese being the ones, the larger population, obviously had the insight and vision to say that this was a nation that offered opportunities for them to have the freedoms to pursue their objectives of being, I would say, prosperous.
Prosperous, the American dream.
The American dream. And I sort of say that, despite the fact that my ancestors were brought here against their will. Right. Found after that the opportunity once freedom found its course and their being brought here to sort of find that same American dream. So with this sort of being demolished or was dissolved, meaning that this month in recognition, it to me it sort of alarms. I think inside of me it alarms the state of where we are. In this, and so I hope that we won't stop the celebration of that, because I think on the backs of those that actually helped to build that transcontinental railroad, enabled this country to be able to ship goods and services across the nation. On their backs to do this. And I've always seen little bits and pieces, like whether it was in a movie or a documentary, but not the sort of that full thing. I think about even like the Japanese internment camps. Oh, yeah. Now, I saw something that was in, what was that? Was it something in 1940?
You're talking about the actual
in May.
Happened.
Well, in May or something, wasn't it?
So that's when the first Japanese immigrants started arriving, was in 1843 in May.
1843
in May. So then you think probably 100 years later, is when the internment camps started, right? Because that was in World War II.
So they started in
1843 is when the first Japanese immigrants started arriving.
That's amazing.
So, yes. So you're talking about when you're getting into the internment camps in Japan.
Well, wait a minute, but hold on. Let me wrap my mind around that for a second. Okay, so 1843 you said.
Years earlier. It's 100 years earlier. Before
so we still had slavery in this country at that time.
Still had slavery, yeah.
And then Japanese.
And then you had Japanese coming in.
So where were they coming? Like into San Francisco area? Or what do you think?
That's what I would think. Yeah, they had to be coming that way on the West Coast, right?
Okay. Coming in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so they would not have been totally immersed into the actual
coming into the east, like coming into the East Coast.
Yeah, the Atlantic.
They wouldn't have seen
the Atlantic.
Perhaps they wouldn't have seen that portion. Now,
I'm sure
whatever
it would trickle.
they had. Yeah, I'm sure they.
It's kind of interesting to see 1843.
Yeah.
And then in
1940s, right? The 40s.
Yeah, because I mean, World War II was going on at that time when they were gathered up and forced into this area.
And you think about the people that had been here, they'd been here for a decade. I mean, that's a generation or two generations.
That's 100 years. And
yeah, so you had probably, you had definitely had American citizens born here, Japanese, born in the U.S.
Yes. Okay.
Definitely they were put in, they were put in a term. It's crazy.
So the quiet contributions that are made are not highlighted.
Correct.
But that sort of, I guess in a sense, I'm still, it makes me, it befuddles me when I think that here they are about 100 years into, and they're gathered up in this time,
right? And
under suspicion.
They're rounded up. Right?
Under suspicion.
Under suspicion that they
are American citizens, but they're basically contributing to.
They don't know, maybe, and some of them probably didn't even speak Japanese. They've never been to Japan.
Had no idea.
They had no idea. It's just the way that they looked, their name, the way that they looked. That's it.
Okay.
100%.
Wow.
And they're still thrown into the internment camps.
I wonder about now, for example, you've got Koreans.
Yes.
Here and they are part of the makeup group here as well.
Yeah, Korean, Japanese, Filipino. Yeah.
And the Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. All and I think that one of the things and I've always believed that, as a nation, one of the things that I thought made the red, white, and blue stand out, and I'm sure maybe it's just me, but I thought it made this country one of those beacons where you had a culmination of all these different countries around the world representing one nation that gave us a light that all of us together, despite our differences and maybe our, perspective on things, still gave us that diversity that was strong enough and strength-wise to sort of hold up and say, this is what we could be as humanity.
Right. We can all be different ethnicities, but we're all Americans, I guess.
Yes. Right. Under that flag that unites us all.
Like you and I, Harold, are different ethnicities, but we are Americans.
Absolutely. And we're talking about this.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of part of what, and maybe that's why it's been dismantled and things are being dismantled because of the fear. The fear of actually embracing those ideals.
Yeah.
But I think that's what the founders of the country saw, which was kind of, if you think about it, they didn't have social media at that time, but they were looking at down the road, how do we construct this nation so that it's better than where we were before?
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to get away from all of that, the monarchy, the absolute rule. They wanted it to be a nation.
Everyone. So if you think about the Chinese people that came early, must have seen that as well. The reason why they were here.
Like why would I, as a person living in China, want to go travel thousands and thousands of miles across the ocean to a place I have no family, no nothing, but what I want to be there? Why? Why would I do that?
Yeah. So
they must have heard It's
Yeah,
it's the
I've
place to
had
be. They got to. You can build it
I mean,
yourself. You can.
amazing.
Right. You have an amazing opportunity at least. So people took the opportunity, took that chance.
So in that, I mean, again, it sort of takes my breath away to think that it is being dismantled because, I mean, all the contributions that are not even highlighted. We're not even talking about some of the contributions that the Chinese folks have made to this nation.
Yeah.
And or even for that reason, Japanese or the Korean,
Asian, yeah.
or but you think about that and you say, well, if it's being dissolved, why?
Yeah.
What are we afraid of?
Right.
Why would I be afraid of that?
Right.
As a black man here in this country? And I find that sort of disheartening. In the 21st century, here we are going sort of backwards in a sense. But in any case, I'm hoping that none of you out there will stop celebrating.
No, for sure. And to learn more.
And to learn more. That's the reason why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. Because so if you're not a part, if you're not a part of that community,
yes,
it's good to learn about it so you can understand a different perspective.
Right.
Just like you can understand a different perspective by learning about other ethnicities and other people that have come from different areas. So,
I would be so boldly to say that the thing that sort of frightens us to reach over and get a chance to learn about others different than ourselves is one major element: fear. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of you being more than me. I'm afraid of you being less than me. I'm afraid of you taking advantage of me. It's all these fears that we sort of grab onto.
Yeah. You think of the worst always.
And that's what we do.
That's what drives you. And that's what drives the fear.
And so we separate ourselves on this.
Say, I want to be with people that are like me.
Yes.
Look like me. Maybe talk like me. Act like me. But yeah, we need to stop.
So now in that, because the reason why we were having this conversation today is because I wanted to sort of understand a little bit more about this month's celebration of Asian Island Pacific.
Native Hawaiian.
Yes,
there's other good things in here. So just read again the commission that we talked about missing in history. The other one is that which is a really interesting one is that Asian Americans are stereotyped as a model minority, meaning passive, compliant, overachieving, and without problems or needs.
See, so that right there sort of,
it's all not true.
I try to, I know I heard that before.
Yeah.
Okay.
The model minority.
Yes. And I was sort of, and when I think I heard that was right after the George Floyd situation that happened.
For sure.
And I heard someone, I believe she was Chinese, in an interview, and she had stated that she had said that something just like that Chinese have been sort of considered
overachieving without problems or needs.
So without problems, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, like we have all the money in the world. Like, what does that mean?
Without problems.
I don't have any problems.
Okay.
It doesn't make any sense.
I thought, okay. And now I tried to dissect that statement back then. And the thing that I came up with, and hear me out for a second, because if you are passive in your sort of demeanor, meaning that even if someone was to sort of wrong you for whatever reason, you just kind of took it and moved on and did. And so me as a black person said, okay, we've been subjected to this sort of behavior for hundreds of years. Unless we stop and put a stop to it,
it's going to continue.
So then we become sort of the problem element,
right?
And because we refuse to take that. Now, if you think about America in the very beginning in its founding states, they left Britain to get away from all of that sort of thing.
Yeah,
rebelling against the system that was there.
Exactly.
And to have the freedoms,
right? That we have today.
That's it. Yes. And so in doing so, when you find someone now that says, okay, I'm going to sort of now take over because I've got the means to do so, I'm taking lead, and now everyone falls under this umbrella and you don't rebel. So this country has been a country of rebellious individuals from its founding states. And you think about Chinese when they left China, they were rebelling against the systems that were in place there to come to a place where they could actually set up and have the opportunity, I would suspect. Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
That's fair.
So I'm thinking that when we start to look at how we're dismantling the Constitution, so to speak, I've heard that thrown around recently here, then we are throwing away what it was that we came here for. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But so when I say that to erase or to dismantle the contributions that Asian island Pacificers, brought to this nation, and to eliminate that, say, okay, we're not even going to celebrate that anymore. We're going to dismantle that, sort of says to the American citizen that your contributions are not important anymore. And I hope that the rebellious aspect of the American citizens say that I refuse to succumb to that when my ancestors came here for the freedoms that we have and the freedoms that this nation stood for.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, look at it. I mean, the cultural contributions.
Yeah.
I mean, art.
Everything.
Politics.
Politics, yeah.
I mean, you look at.
Yeah, and I would say too, like just your rebellious. I think now more and more, culturally.
Okay.
I think you have to look at that as well when you think of model minority. Culturally, what you were talking about is, the Asian peoples that were coming over were under, certain rules where they had to accept it. So they come here to America, they get their opportunity, they get it, they make it the most that they can make of it. And they move on and they don't say anything about it. Right. So they don't have these political uprisings, right? They don't have, these movements, right? You don't hear about, there was a Chinese American movement that forced these people to give the Chinese Americans what they needed and what they wanted. You'll find that a lot of, and this is how I feel about it anyway, you ride a lot on the other the other minorities here in the U.S. is kind of how we rode on the coattails.
So sort of the paved the way in a sense.
Paved the way, right? So like the civil rights movement. I think we talked about this.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Where the civil rights movement paved the way to have the freedoms that for all minorities, not just the blacks, right? Black people. It's for everyone.
And that's interesting.
But that's kind of, I think that's where again you see, hey, it's the model minority because. You have your African Americans rising up and making bold statements, and they're doing the civil rights thing. And then you had a few Asian, if you read about it, there were a few Asian Americans that were involved in those things. However, it was very few. It wasn't like majority. Right. For the most part, people were sitting in the homes and just being like, oh, that's, what they're doing. They probably agreed with it, but they wouldn't go out and stand and march and do all those other things. But I think that's changing now. I think you're seeing that other, minorities are coming out in full force and standing up now. It's interesting
you're saying that because that was in that the lady that was speaking, and she was a young lady, and she was Chinese, I believe, and she was saying that, and she made this statement. It gave me goosebumps because she said, we're going to stand with our black brothers and sisters here. And I thought, oh my God, this is what the nation was built upon, this kind of energy.
Right.
Whether you were white, black, brown, yellow, green, blue, orange, we were all under this flag, united.
Yep. So I think that's,
I totally.
That's what I think for the mob. I think that's changing in the model minority. I think we're starting to have a voice, even in politics, you start seeing more and more Asian Americans stepping in, being very loud, boisterous, what we want, what we need for the people. So I think that's going to help. I hope that helps change that perception of that as well, because everyone goes through something. I'm not sitting here, living the highest life. I'm a regular, everyday person, just like you are. We're all regular human beings, and Just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I'm not model minority.
Well, I think sometimes if you think about it,
Yep.
and just like what you were saying about, it being stereotyped as sort of passive aggressive, sort of positioning. Now it's changing where they're saying, you know what, we have to make a stance here and say, okay, here, because you've been here long enough to be part. I mean, you think about it as a young part of this nation. When you think about it, you've been here for half of almost its existence. And so why wouldn't you? You know what I mean?
We have just as much stake in this country as anybody.
As anyone, yes. And so you think, okay, if we can all sort of come to that place where we celebrate each other's strengths and the cultural backgrounds that we bring here. The phrase that I've often heard that I kind of moved away from it, but it was always like the melting pot. And I don't know if I necessarily buy that sort of melting pot but I say a blending of the cultural backgrounds and diversity. The blending of that is sort of what could make this nation great.
Yes.
For the first time.
Yeah.
The blending of that would be that.
All those different perspectives.
Absolutely.
All those different,
Seeing that now we're bringing these strengths together that we can now soar beyond this place to another galaxy far beyond our strengths, so in celebrating, this month here, I'd like to continue have that celebration and even talk more because, you and I, we talk a lot about different things and different topics, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't cross the line. It's like you can look in politics and you won't find the Democratic Party and the Republican Party crossing the line between each other to understand how can they better serve the nation. They don't do that.
It doesn't happen.
Because
there's such a
what
division.
Happens is that we get afraid. We get afraid. It's kind of interesting, and we'll kind of close off here, but, there was Senator John McCain, and he sticks out of my mind because he crossed the line to what he felt was good for the American people.
Sure.
And I thought, wow, what an ideal individual to say, what if I was to cross that line from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party and say, how can we work together for the American people? And then the celebration of this month would still be in place. And maybe it wouldn't just be for the month of May, but it would be for the month of June, July, August, all the way back around to the month of May. So it would be year round.
Yeah.
I hope we could do that. I hope that we as a people can reach that level.
Yeah. It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be really tough.
I don't know. I look at it and it was hopeful in my lifetime I would see some of that come to fruition. I've seen a lot of changes, but I have not seen where that point where you hit that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Where now we are probably in the stride of our existence here in this country.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that, I hope that you guys will continue to celebrate.
Yeah. Celebrate Asian American
Island.
Wait, no. Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Month.
Yes.
May.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah. Well, it's great because you recognize the Native Hawaiians, how important they were and are to our culture and our history. I think Hawaii is the only state where Asian Americans are the majority population.
Yes, I believe it is.
I'm pretty sure that is, right? So just think about that. I mean, it's great over there in the Hawaiian Islands, and they've done some great stuff. And we've done some terrible things to them as well, right? The government. We've done terrible things it's everybody.
It's the growth process.
But
if we can get past that, I believe that we can be great. Yep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
Anyways,
follow us.
Yes.
Instagram, Spotify,
YouTube,
TikTok, YouTube,
and Facebook.
Facebook. That's
always. I know. I try to go that same way. So anyway, we'll see you next time on the Lew Perspective.
Bye. Thanks.